Welcome to FPB's Meet the Candidates. I'm your host, Steve Vest. This Cable 10 series allows you, the viewer, to hear directly from the candidates on their views of issues important to all of us. This is leading up to the general election on November 5th. Today's guest is Jamie Comer, candidate for U.S. Congress, representing the 1st District of Kentucky. I'd like to thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
I'm going to start off with the easiest question we have, and that's just, could you tell us about yourself and your history in public service?
Yeah, well, thank you. I've been actually in Congress for 8 years now. The Kentucky General Assembly changed the congressional districts. They do every 10 years after the census, and they put Franklin County in the district 2 years ago, so I've been blessed to represent Franklin County a year and a half. This is like home for me. Actually have a house here, and my kids go to school here. So we love Franklin County. But prior to being in Congress, I was Commissioner of Agriculture. That's how my family ended up in Frankfort. I was there for 4 years. And then I was in Frankfort as a part-time state representative for 11 years. So I've had over 20 years in public service in and out of Frankfort. And in the private sector, I'm a farmer and small business owner. So I feel like I'm uniquely qualified to be in Congress because I've had a small business background, but I've also been active in the community and had the honor of being in Congress for the past 8 years.
Okay. Well, a lot of the things we're going to ask are about local issues. And your district, I mean, talk about local, goes from Frankfort all the way to the Mississippi River. So, you know, do the needs and wants of one end of the district match up with the other end of the district? They
really do. And, you know, prior to being in the 1st Congressional District, Frankfort and Franklin County was in the 6th. So Franklin County was in with Menifee County and counties like that in far eastern Kentucky. Now they're in with counties in far western Kentucky. And, of course, I grew up in Monroe County, which is on the Tennessee line. And most of the eastern end of the district, with the exception of Franklin, Washington, and Anderson, have been in the 1st District since 1992, and I was in college at Western Kentucky University then. But you know, the district's overwhelmingly rural. You know, the hospital's a big employer in most of the counties. The school system's a big employer in most of the counties. Your local officials are very accessible, whether they're in Franklin County or whether they're in Ballard County or Fulton County in West Kentucky. So I feel like the issues are the same. The people are the same. Everybody knows their neighbors. And, you know, again, very blessed to represent those 34 counties and try to spend a lot of time in every county.
Well, 34, that's a big chunk of the state.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Well, what do you see as the most pressing issues specific to the Kentucky's 1st Congressional District and particularly to Frankfort?
Well, so I think everybody's struggling with inflation right now. If you look at the presidential election or the congressional races, the biggest issues always this year are the economy / inflation and crime / the southern border. So in the 1st District, when you look at inflation, I feel like we have inflation for several reasons, one of which is I believe Congress has spent too much money over the last decade at least. We have a lot of unnecessary spending in Washington. I've been able to move up quickly in Washington. I'm the chairman of the House Oversight Committee. We get on TV a lot for investigations, but our core mission is waste, fraud, abuse, and mismanagement in the federal government. And I believe that I've spent a lot of time and hopefully had some success in identifying wasteful spending. And I've done that in Republican administrations and Democrat administrations. It doesn't matter who's president or who's in control of Congress. There's too much money being wasted in Washington. So I feel like if we could reduce wasteful spending, that would have an impact on inflation. I also believe when you look at specific areas of inflation, drug pricing, that's a huge issue for me in the 1st District because I've found these pharmacy benefit managers, and I've led an investigation, a bipartisan investigation of them. I believe they've been adding costs to the prescription drug market. They were created as middlemen to help negotiate drug prices, but they've been bought out by the insurance companies, and they now have started their own pharmacies. And long story short, we found that they've been overbilling Medicare. They've been gouging consumers. They've been extorting money from independent pharmacies. So we're trying to focus on prescription drug costs and how to reduce them. And I think that we're going to see pharmacy benefit manager reform, and hopefully that'll help lower some drug prices. But whether you're buying gas and paying a lot at the pump for gas, or whether you're buying prescription drugs, I think there are things we can do in Congress to help the situation. I want to expand drilling. I think that would help lower energy costs. I support an all of the above energy portfolio: solar, wind, coal. I still support coal, and there's a role for coal, and obviously natural gas, because we need to lower utility costs for manufacturing and jobs and consumers, and the same with prescription drugs. So we're going to keep focusing on inflation. And also, the last thing to answer your question, infrastructure is always a huge issue in the district, and we work with a lot of the local officials on grants. I just talked to the mayor of Frankfurt up there. We're trying to help them with the Singing Bridge to get that project back open in Frankfurt. We've worked and successfully gotten money, hopefully, for the bank restabilization to help with the development of the downtown Frankfurt area, the convention center, and things like that. We communicate with the judge on infrastructure projects here, Judge Mueller. So we're going to keep doing that and just trying to represent the people of the 1st Congressional District, especially the ones in Franklin County.
Okay. Well, what specific initiatives have you supported or proposed to promote economic growth and job creation in the district?
Well, there's a lot. With respect to initiatives, I think that we've got to be careful with talk of tariffs. That's been a huge issue in the presidential race and other issues. We've got a huge bourbon industry in Kentucky. There are tariffs in Europe and tariffs in India that prevent us from exporting bourbon. I come from an agriculture background. We have lots of trade barriers in Europe and the Caribbean and other countries with beef and some of our grain and even tobacco products. So I think that I've been very vocal on trade policy in the United States, and I try to step up at the table whenever there's an initiative by a president, whether it be President Trump or President Biden, that look, this could have an unintended consequence on agriculture, or this could have an unintended consequence on the bourbon industry and things like that. So I've been very outspoken on a lot of trade policy in Washington. There haven't been very many bills passed Congress about economic development. Obviously, during COVID, there was a lot of stimulus that was passed. I supported the CARES Act, which was the first stimulus bill, but then I opposed the last two stimulus bills because I feared that they would lead to inflation, and they have. But every year we appropriate money, and every agency, whether it's the Department of Energy or the Department of Transportation, have excess funds for grants. We work closely with the local elected officials to help identify grant opportunities and apply for grant opportunities. So we communicate with our chambers of commerce. There's always issues that members that have existing businesses are concerned about navigating the bureaucracy in Washington. So we work with them on that. But we try to keep an open communication line with all of our existing job creators in the district to be able to help them, again, navigate the bureaucracy in Washington.
Okay. Well, as chair of the House Committee of Oversight and Accountability, what are your views on federal spending, which you already mentioned, but national debt? National debt.
I mean, this drives me crazy. It's almost doubled just in 8 years since I've been in Congress. And a lot of that happened during COVID. But I think history will not be kind to Congress during COVID. I think there were a lot of bills that were well intended, like the PPP loan program. And I've been very critical of that, even though that was a Republican program. I said that the history will show the PPP loan program will be the greatest transfer of wealth from the government to the rich in the history of America. You can't have a one-size-fits-all approach in Washington, but unfortunately that's what we seem to always get with the way Congress is operating now. But the debt is a huge issue, and it's immoral what Congress over the past 30 years has done to our children and young children. And it doesn't seem like it's a big issue. You're the first person that's asked me about the debt in all of these candidate forums I do, and I appreciate that because it's a big issue for me. And I don't think the average American understands or really unfortunately, is that concerned about it, and they should be, because so much of our budget now goes for interest on the debt. And obviously, interest rates are a lot higher than they have been to combat inflation. But more and more of our tax dollars go for interest on the debt. We actually have to pay people for the money we borrowed, and it's 35 trillion dollars right now. I don't see how our government can continue to operate like this, but every year we're spending between $1 and $2 trillion a year more than we take in. And you just had the national disaster with the hurricane that impacted North Carolina and Tennessee and Georgia so badly. I'm sure when we go back to Washington, there's going to be another supplemental, it's called appropriations bill for that. And it's just, you spend, and it doesn't seem like there are very many people in Washington that are trying to say, hey, this is unnecessary spending. And that's what my committee does, and that's what I try to do. And sometimes we get criticized for it, but I believe somebody's got to be the adult in the room and say, look, the taxpayers can't continue to waste this much money. They're necessary government expenses. Social Security is necessary. I strongly support it. Medicare is necessary. I strongly support it. Our military, up to a point, I think we could, look at some of the military spending. I think we're in countries we don't belong in, and spending money on certain types of weapons that are unnecessary. But for the most part, you have a lot of necessary government spending, but then the government's involved in a lot of things that I don't think the government needs to be involved in. And, I'm going to keep fighting in Congress if I'm reelected to try to cut wasteful spending. Okay.
Are any specific countries that you would name?
Well, I know where you're getting at, but the country of the most conversation right now is Ukraine. If you ask me, do I support Ukraine against Russia? Yes. But we have already given Ukraine well over $200 billion. That's over a fifth of $1 trillion. I wouldn't be surprised if after this hurricane season, we're going to have to spend an equal amount of money in the United States just cleaning up debris and replacing bridges that have been washed out. And I certainly understand the history of the world, and I understand Russia's a bad actor. Russia, Iran, and China, those are three bad countries that we need to be on the lookout for and oppose any expansion or whatever. I think we've done that. I don't think our government, or especially the Ukrainian government, has been real transparent with the money we've already given them. So I support Ukraine, but I believe we've already given them enough money for now.
Okay. Well, let's move on to education. What federal education policies do you support to improve the quality of education and access for resources for students in Kentucky's public schools?
Yeah, I'm a huge supporter of public education. I went to public schools. My wife goes to public schools. My kids are in the Franklin County public school system now. Mm-hmm. I have a daughter at Bondurant Middle School, a son at Western Hills. All three of my kids went to Collins Lane. My oldest daughter's at University of Kentucky now. So we believe strongly in the public school system, and I believe that we need to continue to fully fund public education in Kentucky. I support that. I was in the General Assembly and worked closely with the KEA and different organizations to try to make sure that the schools had what they need. I've supported legislation, championed legislation to try to get more school resource officers mm-hmm. in the schools for school safety. In fact, earlier today, I presented an award to the Franklin County Sheriff's Office. Sheriff Quire got named Sheriff of the Year in Kentucky. And one of the things he's done is, made sure we have a resource officer in every school in Franklin County. That's important to me, and that's something that I've worked hard on in Washington, because we had the school shooting in Marshall County mm-hmm. in West Kentucky, which was in my district, and kids should be safe in schools. And I believe that with respect to public education, I've been a very strong proponent of pushing kids to go to area technology centers. I'm a FFA boy, Future Farmers of America. I'm an ag major, so I believe very passionately in what used to be called a vocational education. I talked to the job creators in the district on a regular basis. They're all looking for skilled workers, and skilled workers make more than people with bachelor's degrees in most areas in college now. So I work closely with our community colleges in Kentucky and our area technology centers in the high schools to see that they have the curriculum and the funding they need. I'll continue to be a supporter of public education. I recognize in my congressional district, you asked earlier about, is there a difference in West Kentucky or Central Kentucky? And there's really not when it comes to the school system. Whether you're in Franklin County or whether you're in McCracken County or Monroe County, where I'm from, we support our schools. My mom was a teacher. My dad was on the Board of Education. So we believe very strongly in public schools, and I will always support public education in Kentucky.
So what about Amendment 2?
I'm sorry?
Amendment 2?
Yeah, look, I've been very critical of the Kentucky General Assembly. I've told them they need to stay out of the amendment business. The Amendment 2, there's so many questions about it. I've got friends that obviously support it, and I know a lot of my friends in education oppose it. I get differing. I'm not an expert on what it does, but I think that if you're going to drastically change the SEEK funding in the state, which that could, if you have school money following the kids to public schools, and if you have more, say, Catholic churches or whatever that start elementary schools or whatever, that's going to have a negative impact on the SEEK funding in the state. And I think that before that amendment was voted on, there should have been a plan. Okay, this is what the SEEK funding will look like, and how, if you have an elementary school in a rural part of Graves County, let's say, where Fancy Farm, everybody knows where Fancy Farm is. They've got an elementary school in Fancy Farm, but they have a big, strong Catholic church, in St. Jerome Parish, where the Fancy Farm picnic is. If they started a elementary school and expanded, what they have there, and that's going to take students away from the Fancy Farm Elementary. How is that school going to sustain itself? Is the local school system going to have flexibility to change the way they spend their money? Because right now there's so many strings attached to education dollars. Principals and superintendents don't have a lot of flexibility to change money around and to try to make adjustments to their budgets. So I think that before you do something drastic like Amendment 2, you've got to have a conversation about how the local school systems are going to be able to adjust if there's a drastic shift in the SEEK funding. So I would prefer that there be a conversation, a transparent conversation. If let's say I were governor, we would try to sit down with all the stakeholders, leaders in public education, leaders in private education, leaders in the teachers union, everybody be at the table, and school choice advocates, and say this is the plan. This is how it's going to work. This is what how the school system is going to be recovered. Because the overwhelming majority of schools in Kentucky are doing well, are serving the students well. There are some poor performing schools in Kentucky, especially in Jefferson County. There's no question about that. But I don't think that you can drastically change the whole funding formula for the state because of a couple of poor performing school districts. So it's not something that I would be advocating for, and you haven't heard me advocate for that amendment at all. I support public education, and I think that before we drastically change the SEEK formula in Kentucky, we've got to have a transparent conversation with all the stakeholders and to come up with a long-term plan on funding, because it's crucial to our next generation that they have a good public education, and that's a role of state government. The biggest role of state government is to fund public education, and I think that there's just a lot of questions right now about that. Okay.
You've talked a little bit about infrastructure. Are there any major things that you think you'd like to see done?
Yeah. So, you look at the whole 1st Congressional District and you talk about infrastructure. Infrastructure isn't just roads and bridges. Infrastructure in West Kentucky and for agriculture is locks and dams. We have all the barge companies in Paducah, a lot of grain farmers along the Ohio River, Mississippi River, and Cumberland River, and Tennessee River. in Green River that grow corn and soybeans that's exported, and a lot of aluminum manufacturers and plants that import and export products on the river. Our river infrastructure is in dire condition, needs significant investment. Obviously, our roads and bridges need significant investment. I mentioned earlier we're trying desperately to help find money in Washington for the Singing Bridge to get that opened back up. Then you got broadband, and I'm very critical of how Kentucky spent its broadband money. We've had a lot of money put in Kentucky for broadband, but I don't think we've invested it wisely. I think like I said, the PBMs are an unnecessary middleman. I think Kentucky Wired would be like the PBMs, an unnecessary middleman in Kentucky on the broadband situation. So I want to see, obviously more money for infrastructure, but I want it invested wisely. And I think you've got a lot of rules and regulations behind some of this infrastructure money, like in the infrastructure bill. I was a critic of that. We got to have, with broadband, we've got to have broadband equity and stuff like that. I don't think that's necessary. We need broadband. It doesn't matter if it goes into whatever communities need broadband. If it's a minority community, that's great. If it's a rural Appalachian community, that's great. Whatever. Just don't tie it to race or gender or anything like that. So I think that we've got to focus on making sure our dollars go as far as they can with infrastructure, and recognize the problem that we have an infrastructure crisis in America. Okay.
Talk a little bit about Social Security, Medicare, long-term sustainability.
Well, long term, we need more money in the Social Security Trust Fund. Mm-hmm. We need more money in Medicare. I strongly support Social Security and Medicare. So under no circumstances do I support any cuts to Social Security and Medicare. We've got to figure out how to get more money into Social Security and Medicare. And I don't think anyone's going to like the real answer to that, and that's why Congress keeps punting on it. This should be a huge issue in the presidential race, but you won't hear either presidential candidate talk about it because they don't want to say, oh, we should do this or that, because the media may say, oh, they're wanting to cut or change, and that spooks seniors. But, the fact of the matter is we're going to have to make sure more money goes to Social Security and Medicare. That's called non-discretionary spending, and it's going to have an influx of a lot of cash. Now, there's a huge bill that's finally making its way through Congress that I've supported. It's called the Social Security Fairness Act, and we've had a lot of people in Franklin County call us about it. And it's if you're a teacher and you didn't pay into the Social Security system, but your spouse did. Right now, teachers aren't eligible to receive those Social Security benefits. This would change that. It's called the Social Security Fairness Act. I've always been a co-sponsor of that bill, and that's something that I hope we can get passed through the House of Representatives in November when we go back. I think it's got what's called a discharge petition, and it's finally making its way through Congress. But again, that has a huge fiscal impact on the Social Security budget score. So I'm always going to support Social Security, Medicare, like I do public education. But we've got to recognize the fact that we've got to make sure those dollars go as far as they can. And what happens if you have a politician or a congressman question how this money's spent, then sometimes the media jumps on them and says, oh, they don't support it or say something negative. But somebody's got to ask questions, like whether it's money to Ukraine, whether it's money for broadband in Franklin County, whether it's money in public education. Is this the best way we can spend this money? And I think that you've got a lot of people in Washington that are afraid to ask those questions, and I'm not, and I'll continue to ask those questions. But certainly we need to support Social Security and Medicare and try to get more money to stabilize it for the future.
Okay. Well, on social issues, you've generally voted along conservative lines on most social issues. And how do you balance that with representing such a diverse district?
Yeah. Well, I think the district over is, for the most part, pretty socially conservative. Even Franklin County, which would be more moderate in the social conservative ideological spectrum. Yeah. But I try to vote the way that I believe the majority of the people in my district support, and hopefully the majority of the people support my voting record. One thing about me, you may not agree with me on the issue, but you'll know where I stand on the issue because I do more interviews than anybody in Congress, and I try to be transparent and accessible. We have a Facebook site, an official Facebook site we post, our interviews on, and we try to reply to our messages when people call about different issues.
Okay. Well, let's talk about immigration for a minute. You've voted for stricter immigration measures. Can you elaborate on your immigration stance?
Well, we've got an immigration crisis in America. We've got a workforce shortage in America. You talk to employers and you get a different answer than talking to someone at Walmart or someone at a baseball game or something about immigration. The employers tend to recognize the fact that we've got to get more workers in there. The average person on the street is pretty frustrated that there's so many illegals coming in the United States. I think we've got to support legal immigration. I think we need to expand the H-2A guest worker program, H-2A and H-2B. That's your guest workers for farmers and construction workers. If you see someone putting a roof on, if you see someone working in a tobacco field, they don't look like me. And we've got to get more workers into the country. And if someone wants to come to the United States legally because we're the greatest country in the world and they have more opportunities, then they should be able to do that. But crossing over here illegally is not good, and I'm totally against it. I just spent the last 2 hours at the Boone Center at the Kentucky National Guard base, and obviously they've played a big role and probably going to play a bigger role perhaps in the future on securing the border. We need to secure the border, number one. Number two, we need to increase the opportunity and decrease the red tape for people to come over here legally. But if you're not here legally, then I don't think you should vote or anything like that, and I certainly don't think you should be here if you're here illegally. So we've got to secure the border, but then admit that we've got to have more people come over here just to fill jobs that a lot of Americans for whatever reason aren't taking. So I support immigration reform, but it starts with securing the border.
Well, depending on what you're watching or who you're listening to, Springfield, Ohio has problems with immigrants, but then the people in Springfield, Republicans, will tell you that their economy is better than it's ever been, and part of that is due to the influx of immigrants.
Yeah, well, the economy's great except for inflation.
Yeah,
and I think the inflation has come from overstimulating the economy during COVID and stimulus, government spending too much money. I think some of our energy policies have created energy inflation, utility bill inflation, but at the end of the day, there's a shortage of workers, but we can't keep letting people come across the border illegally. We've got more fentanyl in the United States than we've ever had. That's coming across the border. You can ask if you don't, I'll say that, and someone on MSNBC will throw a chair at me and say I'm racist, but that's not true. It's coming across the border. You can ask any law enforcement official, whether they're black, white, Hispanic, Republican, or Democrat, they will tell you the fentanyl is coming across the border. And until we secure the border, we're going to continue to have a fentanyl crisis in America. We have kids that are unaccounted for, kids that are being human trafficked in the sex trade in the United States. We can do better than that in the country. And I think we need to secure our southern border, but admit, at the same time, once we secure the border, focus on trying to get the people who want to come here legally much quicker and much cheaper.
Okay. Well, I've made it about halfway through my questions.
All right.
But it's your turn now.
Yeah.
You can answer anything I didn't ask you. If you want to talk about bipartisanship,
sure.
whatever you want to. And it's your turn to talk to the viewers.
All right. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to come in front of the Frankfort Plant Board. I'm a Frankfort Plant Board customer. I did this 2 years ago when Franklin County got put in the district, and we'll always try to do this. And, I want to be transparent with the people of Franklin County, and I want to sincerely ask the people of Franklin County for your vote and support on November 5th. I have a website, jamescomer.com. Feel free to go on there. We have an official Facebook site. and a Twitter site that shows a lot of the interviews and a lot of pictures from when I'm traveling the district and press releases we send out and things like that. I want to be an active, accessible member of Congress for the people of Franklin County. I consider Franklin County my home away from home, but it's my family's home. My wife and kids love Franklin County, and obviously my kids go to the Franklin County Public Schools and will continue to do that. I believe that we've got to focus in Washington on reducing wasteful spending, and that's a huge priority for me. And I'm the guy that'll ask the questions as to where the money's going and is this a necessary expense and things like that. And I think somebody has to get the backs of the taxpayers of the United States, and that's the role I've tried to play in the 8 years I've been in Congress. So I'll continue to try to represent the people. We have a bunch of caseworkers to help our seniors with Social Security and Medicare. We work with the local VFW to help our veterans with military benefits. And if anybody ever needs anything, don't hesitate to reach out to my office, and we'll certainly try to help. But again, I appreciate the opportunity to answer questions in the candidate forum here, and look forward to seeing everybody in Franklin County when I go to all the baseball games and middle school cheerleading events and all the stuff that my kids are involved in.
Well, thank you. Congressman Cumber, thank you for coming in. I know our viewers appreciate hearing from you. And to our viewers, I would like to remind you to get out on Tuesday, November 5th and vote, and then tune into Channel 10 and see the results as they come into the county clerk's office. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your time.